Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Their Excellencies President Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, and President Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia. Thank you. They're about to enter, I'm told. Apologies. I got the wrong cue. Here they are. I believe this is them. Anyway, you're all in good practice, so that's great. They will be entering through those doors, so we are watching the doors now. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Their Excellencies President Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, and President Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for gracing us with your presence today. Yes, you may all take your seats. Thank you all. Murakose. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Inclusive Fintech Forum, which of course is a unique collaboration between Singapore and Rwanda, and it's specifically between the Kigali International Financial Center and Singapore's Elivandi, which is a part of the city's central bank. My name is Sharanjit Lail. It is truly an honor and privilege to be your master of ceremonies today. Now, before I introduce our esteemed speakers for this incredible session we're about to witness, I'd like to first introduce a video.
Inclusive finance. Universal access at a reasonable cost to a wide range of financial services provided by a variety of sound and sustainable institutions. In developing countries today, 71% of people have an account, up from 42% a decade ago. Digital financial services have been launched in over 80 countries. These achievements have been powered by policy reforms, private sector innovation, mobile and digitally enabled payments, and more. The pandemic further accelerated the adoption of digital solutions, transforming access to lower-cost transactions. However, the growth is not uniform. The continued growth is not guaranteed. 1.4 billion remain unbanked. The gender gap in access to finance still exists. The economic impact from free trade agreements in emerging markets, such as the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, will be hindered without digital solutions for cross-border payments and trade. Funding to power fintech innovation is decreasing. Uncertain and complex regulatory environments are slowing down growth, scale, and profitability. This convening at the Inclusive Fintech Forum is designed to accelerate implementation strategies, policies, and partnerships that will harness technology to accelerate banking the unbanked.
How do we implement affordable and scalable interoperable payment infrastructure?
How do we scale and sustain affordable digital lending products? How do we design micro-wealth, micro-investment, micro-insurance, and micro-pension products? How do we deliver relevant financial literacy and fintech upskilling programs?
Your participation in this forum and continued efforts after this gathering will help drive an equitable, accessible, and sustainable world through the development of fintech for good.
Welcome to the inaugural Inclusive Fintech Forum.
Once again, a very warm welcome. This is all about FinTech for good, and it is truly extraordinary that at this inaugural Inclusive FinTech Forum, we have gathered with us nearly 3,000 people from over 60 countries. How extraordinary is that? Well, with that, I'd like now to invite onto the stage for a special address the Managing Director of Singapore's Monetary Authority of Singapore, the city's central bank, and of course he is the longest-serving governor for the Monetary Authority, Managing Director Ravi Menon.
His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. I'm truly delighted and honored to be part of this remarkable session, bringing Africa and Asia together on the theme of enabling FinTech for good. There is much that we can do together, and Singapore is proud to be part of this effort. And since coming here just a couple of days ago, my colleagues and I have been simply struck by the energy and vitality of this place. Technology, as you know, is transforming the world of finance. FinTech presents both opportunity and risk. We want to harness these opportunities while managing the risks. In Singapore, when we began our FinTech journey 8 years ago, we set 4 guiding principles for the use of FinTech: to increase efficiency, to manage risks better, to create new opportunities, and most important, to improve people's lives. 8 years later, these principles continue to guide us. And as we walked our FinTech journey, we learned along the way from not only our successes, but more importantly, from our failures. 2 critical enablers have proven decisive in helping us on this journey. First, building foundational digital infrastructure. And second, fostering connectivity and collaboration. Let me say a few quick words about each of them. First, foundational digital infrastructure. Systems that allow different users, different solutions, and different devices to seamlessly interact with one another. Just as physical infrastructure like roads and railways help to connect and advance the industrial economy, we need digital infrastructure today to enable a vibrant digital economy. What are these digital infrastructures? One is a digital identity, so that we can interact with one another digitally with trust and confidence, knowing who is on the other side of the transaction. In Singapore, we introduced SingPass as a digital end-to-end identity to facilitate secure, consent-based verification for residents to digitally access more than 700 government services. 2, interoperable electronic payments. We need not only digital payment solutions, but common payment rails or networks for these solutions to talk to one another, to be interoperable. Which is why in Singapore we built PayNow, an instant payment service. Residents can move money from one another's bank account in real time at 0 cost, with just 3 clicks on their mobile devices, regardless of which bank app that they use. Third digital infrastructure, a trusted data exchange, so that individuals and corporates can access all their relevant data in digital form for purposes of carrying out digital transactions. In Singapore, we established MyInfo, a platform that allows residents to access via their mobile devices more than 100 of their personal particulars and data points and share them on their instruction with third-party service providers through open, secure APIs. The second critical enabler that has helped us is connectivity and collaboration. The full potential of fintech can only be realized if our systems are interconnected across borders and there is active public-private partnership and collaboration to drive innovation. Let me give two examples. One, cross-border payments connectivity. It is not enough that we can pay one another digitally within our countries, be it for migrant workers or students or small and medium enterprises. It is the ability to send money across borders cheaper, faster, and more securely that really matters for efficiency and productivity. Singapore, we successfully connected our instant payment infrastructure, PayNow, to Thailand's PromptPay, and more recently to India's Unified Payment Interface, or UPI. We hope one day we can connect also with countries here in Africa, including Rwanda. Two, platforms for human collaboration. For all the benefits of digital connectivity, face-to-face engagement, such as what we're having now, remain key for innovation. So take, for example, what we did, the Singapore Fintech Festival, a knowledge platform catering to the global fintech community, where participants come to learn and do things together. Last year's festival attracted more than 62,000 participants from over 115 countries. And I'm very happy this collaboration is now expanding its reach in Africa and in Europe through this inaugural Inclusive FinTech Forum in Kigali, which is off to a roaring start, as you can see. And next week, the second edition of the Point Zero Forum in Zurich. Let me conclude with where I started. Everything we do in fintech must serve a higher purpose. It must help to solve real-world problems so that people are better off. And everything that I've mentioned about digital infrastructure and connectivity is well within the capacity of Africa to achieve. In fact, you have a unique opportunity to leapfrog legacy systems and vested interests and build a modern digital economy and society from the ground up on a clean slate. This room is filled with innovators, investors, business leaders, and policymakers from around the continent. Together, we can shape a future where technology and finance converge to create a more prosperous, vibrant, and inclusive Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Managing Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, Ravi Menon, for those inspiring words all about fintech for good. The next speaker, of course, needs no introduction. He is truly a rock star in the financial world. Please welcome Tidjane Thiam, the Board Chairman of Rwanda Finance Limited, for his opening address.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. Your Excellency Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda, Your Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, Ministers and Central Bank Governors, Mr. Ravi Menon, Managing Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, distinguished delegates. It is a particular pleasure for me to be back in Kigali, a city I visited for the first time in 1989 as a young World Bank executive at the time. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this inaugural Inclusive FinTech Forum, which we hope will become annual. Working with the Africa FinTech Network, the AFN, the umbrella body for FinTech companies across Africa, our ambition was to create a leading FinTech event in Africa to act as a catalyst an insightful and inclusive event to accelerate the growth of Africa and its fintech industry. I wish first to recognize His Excellency President Paul Kagame for providing the vision and the leadership that made today's event possible. And second, I want to thank and recognize all of you who are present here today, and particularly those who made a trip all the way to Kigali to be with us during these 3 days. So entrepreneurs, regulators, ministers, central bankers, at the last count, it went from 1,913 to 2,754, and I hear today 3,000. So it's good that the event only lasts 3 days, because I think we would have reached a very, very high number. So thank you all for being present. We have more than 400 delegates from outside Africa, from Asia, from Europe, from North America, the Middle East, making this truly a global event in the heart of Africa. I believe that technology presents our continent with its 1.3 billion people, 500 million plus internet users, and 300 million plus e-commerce consumers with a unique opportunity for inclusive development and economic growth. That is actually true across sectors. That is true of education, of health, of transport, of energy, where there is a revolution underway with solar, but also, last but not least, of course, of fintech. And I want to use a simple example to illustrate this point. I looked at the 10 largest companies in the world by market capitalization, and the list is Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Tesla, NVIDIA, Berkshire Hathaway, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, and finally Saudi Aramco, the oil company from Saudi Arabia. And Meta, sorry, I forgot Meta, Facebook, 10th one. Two observations about this. 8 of those 10 companies were created after 1970. 5 of the 10 were created after 1990. This is the first time in the history of the world. We have 5 of the largest companies of the world which are about 50 years old, which is extraordinary in terms of technology. But for me, what this underlines is the importance and power of innovation in the economy today. And this is an area where we in Africa are not at a disadvantage. We can innovate as well and as much as anybody else. And this is a competition where I believe we will play a leading role. So, coming back to Africa, it is my belief that among you today, we have the potential to develop and grow equally successful companies if we play our cards right. And I'd like to emphasize that those giants all started as SMEs. There is not a single one of them that wasn't started by 1 or 2 people in a garage somewhere, dreaming. And this ability to dream is something we all share. And I think we should have the ambition one day of seeing an African company among those top 10 in the world. I believe that SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, are everywhere the lifeblood of the economy and can never receive too much focus. Because the way to create one of those giants of the world economy is really for SMEs to succeed and grow and become one day a player on the world stage. So this is all well understood in Rwanda. Rwanda possesses a young, dynamic, and educated population that is critical to the development of the fintech sector, with several higher learning institutions that are helping to upskill the youth. Furthermore, the Rwandan government is taking important measures to develop a regulatory sandbox to encourage startups to establish their business in Rwanda, as well as to shift to a cashless economy and achieve nationwide financial inclusion. So as I close, ladies and gentlemen, international financial centers, such as the Kigali International Financial Center, offer fintech firms proximity to long-established and traditional financial services, corporate and retail customers, capital for development, financial skills, along with opportunities to connect with companies across the world. So it is my wish and my hope that this meeting, which again I hope can become annual, will have provided you with an opportunity to increase your network and make connections. In business, we all know that tangible assets are important, the walls, the infrastructure, the cash, but I also believe that intangible assets, ideas, innovation, connections, networking, can possibly be a more important factor even than the tangible assets. So it is the ambition of this forum to be a platform for intangible connectivity and assets. And I hope that you made the most of these days. I firmly believe that the 21st century will go down in history as the African century, and that when someone makes the list of some of the most successful companies in the world in a few decades from now, as I did today, some of those will be African, and are possibly, hopefully, present in this room today. Again, I thank you for attending this forum, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Chairman Tijan Thiam. And they don't call you the rockstar banker for nothing. You are very good with numbers, and you are right. There are about 2,750 attendees, but I have no doubt we will hit 3,000 by the end of our 3 days. How wonderful. Now, next we have Achim Steiner, the administrator for the UN Development Programme. He couldn't be with us here today, but he has sent us a video.
Your Excellency Kagame, President of Rwanda, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with deep regret, I have to confess that I'm unable to be with you in Kigali, as I'm participating in the Summit for a New Global Financing Pact, supporting the UN Secretary-General during his presence in Paris. I would like to share some brief thoughts on how we together can unlock the immense power of inclusive financial technology, or Fintech, to drive progress across the Sustainable Development Goals. From 2018 to the year 2020, I had the honor to serve with Maria Ramos as co-chair of the UN Secretary-General's Task Force on Digital Financing of the SDGs. One of its key insights at the time was that Fintech provides us with an unprecedented opportunity to realign financial systems with national development priorities. Crucially, if we give people more choice over their money through inclusive Fintech, they will also invest in critical areas that matter to them and the generations to come. That includes everything from better education to climate action to new efforts to restore our natural world. We're also seeing how technology can create new forms of inequalities. For example, women are 25% less likely than men to know how to use digital tech for basic purposes, or consider bots and artificial intelligence that reinforce gender bias. Addressing such risks is a key aim of the dialogue on governance of global digital finance, which is exploring the intersection of the so-called big fintechs and sustainable development. Indeed, the African Continental Free Trade Area will establish a digital public infrastructure that will facilitate payments amongst countries in the African Union, ultimately driving growth. There is also new momentum being driven through innovative partnerships. For instance, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, and UNDP are launching an initiative to generate digitally enabled sustainability credentials for businesses. This is part of a larger effort to develop universal trusted credentials for the private sector. This will help them in turn to unlock new sources of finance, and it will allow them to better track their sustainability targets. In this respect, I would also like to recognize the wider contribution of the Monetary Authority of Singapore to advance Fintech. President Kagame, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations family is proud to support countries to harness the immense potential of Fintech to shape a sustainable, inclusive, and greener future for all. This support pivots on a recognition that the smart tech of tomorrow needs smarter policies today. In Rwanda, we have walked a long way in learning together, and I would like to thank you today for this opportunity to develop new approaches to development for the 21st century. Thank you.
Achim Steiner there from the UNDP with his address. Now, next up, it is truly an honor to introduce onto the stage for his special address, His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, the President of the Republic of Zambia.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. To recognize President Paul Kagame, and his team of leaders in this country that are present here, and also my colleagues, fellow cabinet colleagues from Zambia, and all of you distinguished participants, also particularly appreciating the organizers of this FinTech Forum, and indeed those who have played a particular special role to make this FinTech Forum possible. And ladies and gentlemen, I wish not to emphasize the technical aspects of this FinTech Forum, not to emphasize much on the particular aspects that would justify the importance of financial inclusion on the platform of technical, if you like, capabilities. But more to say that, to emphasize that we're privileged to attend this platform together with my colleagues, and I'm sure I speak for others from other parts of the world that are present, but to also emphasize the importance of the need for us to accept that accelerating our economic and social development is an imperative, given, if you like, the large profile of the younger population, especially on this continent of Africa, and the need to provide opportunities for these young people. And to make it very clear that while before it was a debate as to the importance of technology, the importance of financial inclusion, access to capital, and indeed other aspects, it cannot be a question on our lips anymore, because it is one that we acknowledge that financial technology and access to finance, capital, is of utmost importance to our quest to achieve accelerated economic and social development, so we can take care of our populations. Doesn't matter which country we are. It doesn't matter which regulators we have to deal with. It is still critically important to accept that we need this component. We need to bring the unbanked into the economy, into the formal economy. And haven't we seen this in the last couple of years, how simple things were so difficult? What do I mean? Just to send money to a place far away from where you are, we needed to go to the post office sometimes. Have you forgotten that? We needed to go into a physical branch of a bank and fill a form and sign it so you can send just $10 to someone far away. Just think of you first deciding to go to the bank, then getting to the bank, then getting a form, filling that form. The bank manager looks at it and asks you a few questions. After some time, it's taken in. Then you have to wait for 1, 2, 3 days before the recipient actually acknowledges having received the money. Now, leave aside everything else. Just think of the time it used to take. But today, those of us who have rural backgrounds, those of us who live in another part of the world, are able to send money using mobile money. So simple, isn't it? How has this become possible? How is it that we take that for granted? And that not long ago, we couldn't do that. That's what we're here for. So it settles the argument or the debate as to whether this subject we are here for is important or not. We can then spend time to ensure that we can walk, in fact, race towards bringing more of our population into the financial world. Yes, you can talk about financial literacy. Yeah. You can talk about curricula. That is true. You can talk about tools. That's okay. But I want to focus on the end point. The end point ought to be one that creates opportunities for all our people, irrespective of where they are, for them to participate, to take the opportunities that come with being part of the financial system, accessing capital. President Kagame and I were chatting that for us on this continent, we have a bone to chew with the global financial system, that we pay a higher cost of capital than anyone else. Why? But we are judged the same way. When our businesses are being assessed, when the risk profiles are being put together, we are benchmarked in the same way. I think it's an important issue I would like to raise, not as an insider, in terms of those who have organized this, Singapore, Rwanda, to say this should be part of our issue as we push for access, as we push technology platforms. We also need to push the importance of making capital available at a fair price. I think it will partially deal with the subject of, if you like, inequity in this space, but only partially. What else? For financial inclusion, Fintech to work and work properly, I do believe the issue of energy becomes important. Probably it's a remote component I'm bringing, but it's integral to allowing us to achieve the agenda on the table today. The separation, the inequity between urban and rural populations, where we take internet for granted to allow us to use it to basically transact when we need to. It is not the case for some of our citizens, global citizens. So energy access is important, and therefore internet access must be one of our agenda items, that this must become available to most of our people. Most of our people, if not all. And today, with technology again, we are able to have off-grid energy, something that was difficult to even contemplate in some of our countries 15 years ago. Today, it's possible, cost is reasonable, solar. So, lastly, I have put quite a bit on the table. Lastly, I want to emphasize to the organizers how appreciative we are to be part of this forum, but also as a public worker, as your servant, so is President Kagame, and the ministers that are here. Doesn't matter which country you come from, regulators that are here, it doesn't matter where you come from. We want to confirm, and I'm being naughty here because I didn't consult President Kagame, but we want to confirm that. We want to confirm our support for this agenda. We want to confirm our support for this agenda. We want to confirm that it's a duty we have, especially that we manage public finances. It's a duty we have to support young entrepreneurs, innovators. I was just taken to one of the innovation hubs this afternoon, and I was quite enthused with these young people. And I quickly my mind raced back to the days when I was at their age. We never had that opportunity, which they have. The tools were not there. But I said publicly there that we in public offices, we must support these young people, these institutions that are doing things like this. And through them, we will achieve what we had no opportunity to achieve in our time. I think that is really what I wished I could say this afternoon. Once more, congratulations, Singapore, Rwanda, participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, the President of the Republic of Zambia, for those truly inspiring words, really highlighting to the degree of transformation we have all experienced thanks to technology and fintech. Well, once again, it is truly a privilege now to introduce you to His Excellency Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, for his keynote address. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, Tijan Thiam, Board Chairman of Rwanda Finance Limited, doing many other things somewhere else. Ravi Menon, Managing Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, business leaders and entrepreneurs, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Before I get started, President, you reminded some of us the old days of the post office. I remember sometimes the money would actually not arrive. Even after filling the forms and everything, the envelope arrives. Some people used to avoid that and put just the money in an envelope and post it. By the time it arrives, you open, you find a letter informing you that somebody sent you $10, $20, and in the end, but you realize there was somewhere in the corner a cell tape. They had removed the money and sealed the envelope again, but those were the days. So, unfortunately, with time, but at the same time, it comes with the good things that also fill the gaps. Technology has been advancing very fast. Also, the people who would otherwise tear the envelope and remove the money, the numbers have also gone up. But technology helps to deny them the opportunity to commit their crime. So technology is very important, and we've got to make good use of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to Kigali for the inclusive Fintech Forum, and I'm pleased to join you today. Allow me to begin thanking President Hakainde Hichilema for joining us today. Your presence here shows commitment to developing fintech in Africa. I also want to thank the Monetary Authority of Singapore for partnering with us. Singapore partners with Rwanda in many other fields, and we appreciate that. But this time to bring businesses in Singapore and Rwanda closer together. This is a practical demonstration of the good relations between our two countries. Let me commend Tijan, Tiam, and the entire Rwanda Finance Limited team for the important work being done to position Rwanda as one of the leading international financial centers. Fintechs are accelerating Africa's digital transformation, and the impact is evident. Across the continent, more jobs, wealth, and opportunities are being created. At the helm of Africa's fintech industry is a young and rapidly growing population ready to innovate solutions and drive financial inclusion. Africa's demographic dividend has not gone unnoticed by investors who, in recent years, have increased financing to African fintechs. Still, compared to the rest of the world, Africa has produced a small number of unicorns, and the majority of transactions remain cash-based. To sustain the gains already made, we must forge stronger partnerships and build a more equitable, accessible, and sustainable fintech ecosystem. The digital economy is not a zero-sum game. Everyone should benefit from its potential. That's why we must do more to ensure women are active participants in the fintech space. The numbers do not lie. This can have a positive impact on women-owned businesses and on the industry and economies in general. Another persistent challenge is Africa's unharmonized regulatory environment. It affects the ability and speed at which fintechs can scale across different jurisdictions. In our effort to become a proof of concept hub, Rwanda has established an enabling policy and regulatory environment. Fintechs are now able to test their solutions, including new and emerging technologies, in a controlled space. Lastly, to improve the delivery of financial services, we must address the inadequate levels of broadband coverage, documentation, and financial literacy. This forum aims to create a platform for like-minded individuals to share ideas and collaborate. Today, this ambition has become a reality. The key takeaways, which I hope all of you will carry with you from this forum, is that all of us together can multiply our wins and many more people can benefit from this success. Once again, I welcome you all and wish you a very productive forum. Let me also encourage you to do some additional stuff, find some time to enjoy what Rwanda has to offer. Thank you for your kind attention, and you are most welcome.
Thank you once again, Your Excellency President Kagame, for those inspiring words. We are truly honored to be here and, of course, acknowledge the transformative impact of fintech and, of course, your own impact on this remarkable country, Rwanda. Next, I'd like to introduce our session, which is all about enabling fintech for good, which is why we're here today. And I'd like to introduce the moderator, Robert Achola. He is the CEO of Africa Nenda, and his panelists, Mukaya Tai-Panic, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Investment Officer of SCB 10X, and Dare Okonju, the Founder and Chief Executive Officer of MFS Africa. Please come on stage. Thank you.
His Excellency, President Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, His Excellency, Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Governors, Captains of Industry, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to be here this afternoon at this phenomenal conference to discuss FinTech for Good. Allow me just to take you to 2015. I'd like to give a quote from His Excellency President Kagame, because I think this sets the scene for the conversation that we'd like to have today. Excellency Kagame said, "Listen more to the one who criticizes you and less to the one who praises you. Learn from them and then do something about it." And that's exactly the theme that I'd like to have today. We want to have a frank conversation because indeed over the last decade or so, we've seen significant shifts in innovation, in fintechs across Africa, but I believe we're now at a significant inflection point. I'd like to just call out some statistics. This is just an example, so it's not the only place in the world, but Stanford entrepreneurs generated revenues of about 2.7 trillion annually and have created 5.4 million jobs since 1930s. And for those of you who know, Stanford was created in 1885 and is indeed probably the sort of starting point for Silicon Valley. And indeed, we've also seen that the Stanford alumni have created over 40,000 companies, some of which I think Tijan called out today. So Tesla is one of them. And this brought me to the point of the conversation today. We have some statistics that we share that shows that in 2022, the annual revenue for fintechs in Africa was around $4 billion. and projections suggest that we'll have an 8x growth by 2025 to about 30 billion. But there are a couple of constraints that I think exist, and this is what I would like to start in terms of opening to our panel, because I think the issue of 8x only takes Africa in terms of contribution to the global revenues that fintechs have of slightly under 10%. And I think what we need to do in the next 3 to 5 years is try and accelerate that to 20x. So without further ado, Dari, let me start with you. I'd like to start with you and like you to share some of the critical challenges you as an entrepreneur who has created MSF Africa and exists within various markets on the continent. What are some of the challenges you see, and what are some of the policy constraints that you go through which you think is inhibiting not just your business, but other fintechs across the continent? Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks very much. All protocol observed. It's a real pleasure to be here in Kigali. Like Tijan mentioned, my first visit was actually 22 years ago, 2001. And coming here and see the progress that has been made gives me a lot of hope for a lot of countries across Africa. And I want to build on what President Kagame and President Hichilema said about the post office. And, you know, before the post office to send money, there was also just making calls to home. And there was a time where we also have to, first of all, write a letter to set a date and time we're going to call. And then find, you know, those payphones that I don't see anymore to actually call from there, call a neighbor to be able to talk to our parents. So first, we have to recognize that we made a lot of progress and that we no longer need to do this. You know, we all take for granted in this room that if I just flash my mom's number off the screen here in Benin, we all take for granted that we can probably dial her in, she can follow the debate. 30 years, 40 years ago, we couldn't take that for granted. We have made progress, and that communication has laid a foundation on which mobile money was built. And I was privileged enough to be part of, with my ex-colleague from MTN, Minister, I was sitting next to him there, to be part of building that mobile money, which makes it also most people across Africa today take for granted that they can move money domestically. You know, pick up my phone in Zambia, or whether I'm in Lusaka, I'm in Kigali, that I can send money to someone else within those countries. But many times today, the question of the cross-border came through. And the cross-border is not just something that we want to do because it's cool. It is something that we need because our markets are too small. That doesn't matter really how brilliant your idea is in Zambia. If what you're coming up with, and I'm talking about digital services here, is only limited to Zambia, it is too small. And we will never make it to that list that you're talking about. Your market has to be the whole of Africa, if not beyond. And while we've laid the foundation for communication that allow us to imagine a service born in Zambia today that would be appealing to someone in Liberia, in Madagascar, in Benin, we don't have the infrastructure yet to be able to pay by all these people from Liberia and Madagascar. And I think that has to be the heart of it. The heart of it has to be that the next wave in the fintech innovation at the level of the continent has to be creating the rails that remove borders, that makes it a little bit fairer. Where you are born does not limit what you can do. Because if you find yourself in Nigeria versus in South Africa or Zambia, you are clearly disadvantaged if you're in Zambia by the size of the market. So I think for me, the issue of the cross-border really payment is the key one. And what are the policy barriers or complications? And MFS Africa, it's a whole business that we have built on solving for cross-border. The number one problem we're seeing is that everybody is happy with cross-border as long as we're talking about inbound. So every country wants to receive, and the regulators and policymakers will be absolutely delighted to help you to receive, but nobody wants to send. Well, how does it work? Who's going to receive? And you take this, and you know, it sounds like, again, when we talk about this, the mind goes quickly to remittance. It's not about remittance. It's about trade. And if you go to the border between Zambia and Congo, you know what I'm talking about. If you go to the border between Benin and Nigeria, you know what I'm talking about. If you go to the border between, South Africa and Malawi, or you know what I'm talking about. The people trading across those borders actually don't see borders. It's merely a line. Most of the time, it's the same people. But today, it is not possible to pick up my phone in Benin Republic and make a payment to Nigeria. It is not possible to take my phone in Togo, Lomé, and make a payment to Ghana. It's probably going to be quicker to drive and bring the money. You don't even need to put it into the post. So I think we have a real question here around the willingness to support African entrepreneurs, especially the digital ones, to open up transaction between our countries. And I think this is more a question of will than a question of capability. The technology is there. MFS Africa are happy to report that at the very least, between Zambia and Rwanda, it is possible. So if you pick up your MTN Rwanda phone right now and you want to send money to President Hichilema, you can do that. It will actually arrive on his phone, whether he's on MTN or Airtel on the other side, thanks to the work that we're doing. But it will not be possible to pay someone in Benin. And that, it's a question of will, not a question of capability. So to come back, I think if we want to really make a change, we have to offer entrepreneurs a bigger market. It has to be the whole of Africa. And to be the whole of Africa, it has to be possible to pay each other with minimum friction.
Thank you very much, Dari. And indeed, you've called out a very important issue. As we all know today, and I think some numbers quoted yesterday, that global cross-border trade costs about 6%. So for every $100 you're sending, it costs you about 6%. Africa, the number is between 12 to 24%. SDG goals are talking about a 3%. So I think the gap and cost structure is very, very high. Before I go to Tai, I just wanted to share something very quick, because I think we solved the problem of traveling from one African country to another, because I think at some point I was told, this is before I was born, that you used to travel to London to travel down to Uganda. I don't know if that is true. And indeed, the phone calls using the landlines used to get switched in the UK as well, and I'm sure that was similar in West Africa. And now on the cross-border issue, that continues to be a challenge. So, Tai, just taking on from that, what are some of the experiences that Asia went through, and how can we learn from some of the interventions you made?
Yeah, I think for the growth of fintech to proliferate in this region, I can see the similarity in Asia. So, for example, I think there are a lot of policy support that the government can help. The first thing that I can think of is data access. So we see that fintech companies, they actually require a lot of access to data to develop products and services. And the government could actually provide access to the data that is held by the government agency and also other public bodies, so that these fintech companies could develop their products and services that are more innovative and target to the right customers. For this, we actually see the example in Vietnam. So there's a fintech company called Trusting Social. They develop the credit scoring for lending, and the government actually helped them in this front to get the access to data from telecom companies, and they could get close to 80 to 90% of the telecom data in Vietnam, and so they could develop very effective credit scoring for lending. So that is the first thing. And then the second thing is definitely the support on the regulatory sandbox, where the fintech company can develop new products and services and can test in the live environment with reduced regulatory oversight. That can be very, very beneficial because they can test their product before launching to the public. And this can also help to identify and address the potential risks that could happen. And then third thing that I can think about that the government could help is definitely collaboration. The government can help collaborate with the fintech companies, and doing this can also help identify and address the challenges that the sector is facing. And this can also help develop the policy that could support the overall growth of the sector.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to pivot to Dari. I want to ask you a question and provoke you a little bit. Today in Africa, we have, of course, 54, 55, depending on where you sit. But in your business and your business model, and the fact that when you're looking at driving technology, are we going to set up 54 times 2 tier 4 data centers that, and then build regulatory sandboxes across 54 different countries? Or is there a need to rethink the business model? Because you're talking about the fact that today, and as we know, the pyramid in Africa, I think there's 5 or 6 countries with populations of about 90 million, and then it drops between 50 and 30, and then quite a few countries are sitting below 20 million. So in terms of business cases, in terms of actually driving fintechs that are sustainable, what do we need to change? Because is Africa going to be treated completely as a segmented market, especially around the digital footprint that we need to put in place? What are your views on that?
Yeah. No, it's something that keeps me awake. You know, as a business that started in South Africa, where I'm based, and now we operate in 40 countries across the continent. We connect over 400 million mobile wallets. We facilitate cross-border payment within Africa. But most importantly, we are the infrastructure on which rely many fintechs to expand in markets. So someone starting in Uganda, providing a digital loan, wants to expand to Kenya or into Cote d'Ivoire, they will continue to use our infrastructure to do that. So we get a bit of a first-hand experience of what it means to scale across the continent. And to your question, the question of data center, localization of data, and regulatory sandbox comes. Obviously, I mean, regulators has a difficult job, and we have to acknowledge that, because on one hand, you have all these entrepreneurs, including myself, shouting at them every day that they need to make it easier. But they also have a huge responsibility to protect the consumers, especially the most vulnerable one. And we know that even, I mean, you look at how my own father used Facebook, someone should stop him. Like, he's just not equipped to do that. And when it comes to money, it's even more. So there is a delicate balance around the data and the data protection. And there is difficult debate around sovereignty and what, the state of protection. And we know that, there are some countries that are more difficult than others. There is instability in some countries. So I don't think there is a blanket answer to the question of the data and the data center and how data should be localized. But I think there is an answer to the question of the regulatory sandbox. I think Europe, or European Union at least, offered us a great example in the passporting. And I think it's high time that we consider that if I'm good enough to have a PSP license here in Rwanda, why can't I passport it to Zambia? And vice versa. Now, the beautiful thing about the passporting is we don't need a big AU summit to decide this. It's like the visa. Each country can decide. Rwanda can decide. I trust Zambia enough that if you have passed whatever regulatory barriers the Zambian authority put in place and you got your license, you can passport to Rwanda. So, I mean, since you ask us to be provocative and I have the opportunity to, I will put the question to the head of state to say, why don't we at least start there? And in many instances, both Zambia and Rwanda has shown extreme leadership when it comes to technology and entrepreneurship. And I'm sure my fellow entrepreneurs in the room will want to expand from one of these countries to the other. And I think we need to see more of that, and we need to really think about how to simplify. Because at the end of the day, markets matter. If you have an idea in the US, it's more valuable than having the same idea in Guinea-Conakry. Why? Because the market is so much bigger. So how do we give bigger markets to our entrepreneurs? That has to be part of policy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Tai, I want to tell a quick story. This story goes back to my time in the telco sector. About 10 years ago, I was in Safaricom. And of course, M-Pesa was a big thing at that time. And what used to happen was used to run hackathons. And every time you brought in all these excellent young engineers and developers, they would all be solving the same problem. So you have 100 guys or 200 people in the room, and they come in blind because they don't actually have anything else that they know. They don't have any data around where the next big thing is. They don't have any data around what the opportunities are. So from their vantage point, they go in, they sit, and you present a problem, and everybody tries to solve that problem. And assuming 3 of them fix it, the other 197 go home with nothing. So I just want to pick from your understanding and experience, again, in Asia. How has government, academia, and potentially private sector come together to hopefully present opportunities that then fintechs who are young and upcoming have an idea of where the problem statements are and where they should spend some of their time in developing solutions, so we don't get this crowd mentality where we're all chasing after one prize, because of course not everybody will win.
Yeah, so for this type of problem, I think there's the need to have incentives and also something to incentivize the market ecosystem to come together for the fintech startup to be able to grow and support one another. So I think the first thing that I can think of is that the fintech companies normally have to abide by a lot of regulations, because a lot of time, it has a lot to do with money, right? With lending, with financing, with payment, and so there are a lot of regulations involved. So I think the first thing, I think we talk a lot about regulation, and again, I would like to talk about regulation support that the government and regulators could actually do many things to help the ecosystem to grow. For example, we talk about regulatory sandbox. Other things can be reducing regulatory barriers and also have a clear and consistent policy and guidance. And then the second thing, I think that, for example, access is very important. Access to talents. I think that normally when emerging market try to develop new technology, very, very challenge issue is that there are not many talents. And that's very important to probably have to develop the talents from the ground up. And government can actually really help coming up with education and training programs to develop these potential talents in the technology area that could foster the growth of the ecosystem. And also to, I think that there's some area as well that talent is difficult to develop. If the government could actually attract the foreign talents to come into the country, that also can actually help develop the talent within the country and the region much more effectively. And this can be done via proactive visa policy. Then I think the issue of infrastructure too, because a lot of ideas could be coming out wanting to do many startups that have very advanced technology, like in the US or in the Western country. But infrastructure might still have a big issue, the gap that have to fulfill. So the government and the private companies in this region could also come together to help provide the funding support for the technologies, for the upgrade, the rollout of the new advanced technology, or like the supportive environment for cloud computing, for example, because cloud computing can be very, very useful for startup in this region because you don't need to really require a lot of capital in order to start the company, because everything can be more like on demand, pay whatever when you need it.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a private sector roundtable, so we're actually ahead of time. I'm just going to allow you some parting shots. Final key comments. Today you know who's sitting in the room. And actually, two things about the countries that we're discussing, especially from a financial inclusion perspective. The numbers and especially the growth in both Zambia and Rwanda over the last 5 or 6 years has been extremely impressive. So I think the ingredients for innovation to thrive in both those markets is alive and well today. So, Dari, over to you. Again, it's a rare occasion to sit in front of two excellencies who drive a very strong agenda within their countries. You have 1 minute. What's the key message?
Oh, wow. I feel the pressure. So I have a parting shot and I have a request. I've promised my team that they will take a picture with the president. Thank you. Thank you. The parting thought is probably, building a bit on what Tai is saying. I think we talk a lot about talent and not enough about talent density. And I think the two are different. I think, there's some magic that happens when really good people colliding into each other in a place. And I think there's opportunity for that in many places in Africa. And definitely, Kigali is probably leading Lusaka on that, I would say. But there is an opportunity to be the center. And this has no other purpose than just to bring really smart people together. And magic happens. And I think, as we think about policy, and we talk a lot about attracting companies, attracting investment, there should be some thought going to attracting talent, simply. Just allowing people to go and settle in a place and see what happens. And that will be one of the things that we would love to see. What will that place be for Africa?
Thank you. Thank you, Dari. And then, fantastic. Tai, any final thoughts, any considerations, anything that we should leave with from, again, the Asia experience? I'll give you 1 minute as well.
I think the future of fintech looks very bright right now. There are many interesting technology that are developing and growing. For example, I would like to maybe talk about the rise of AI, the growth of blockchain, and also the growth of open banking. For AI, I think it has been using for a long time in fintech. But I think recently we have seen generative AI, ChatGPT. I think probably most of you have already tried using ChatGPT and got amazed how AI nowadays could actually interact like human. So the user interface is now very, very inspiring. So I'm quite confident that fintech applications in the future and many of the fintech founders will be quite interested to actually use generative AI to combine with their fintech application. So I think that very exciting. It's a great time to be in fintech right now. And then second thing about the growth of blockchain. So blockchain technology has the potential to be the game changer, to be the revolution of financial system. And that is because the technology could take out the middleman and the financial system can become very transparent, very fast, very efficient, lower cost. And that because it uses software or smart contract to do all the transaction. And that is super exciting. And I think that Africa is going to be probably the most inspiring potential for the growth of blockchain. I have seen in the past that emerging market sometimes because the technology is a little bit lagging behind, there's a chance of even leapfrog to a better technology. Like in the past, we saw in some emerging market that they had low penetration of fixed landline phone, but instead of trying to increase the penetration of fixed landline phone, they actually leapfrog to mobile phone directly. And I feel that there is a potential for Africa to actually leapfrog using blockchain. So that is something to think about. And then the third thing is about the growth of open banking. So open banking is the system that allows the third-party financial service provider to get access to the bank customer data via access via the API access. And that can be very open for many possibilities of innovation, because the fintech companies can develop more innovative products that can tailor to specific customer need, because they can get access to the data of bank customer, and bank in return can also get fees from providing this API access. And we have seen in the past the example of Plate, which is a fintech company that provide the API access to banks and credit card providers. So yeah, these are the excellent time for being in fintech right now, and I feel there's so many interesting technology that are enabling fintech future.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tai. Actually, and I relate to the fact that it's a big opportunity for us to leapfrog. And I'm not to simplify what you said, but I applied for a landline in Kenya, where I'm from, in 1993. I'm still waiting for their response. So I think you're right, leapfrogging is definitely the way to go. Thank you very much, Excellencies and everybody else. Allow me just to conclude with a couple of summaries from today's, I think, very riveting conversation. So I throw out some questions as I conclude. Does Africa need a think tank or some form of collaboration to provide a data-driven approach to insights that then allow the fintechs to fine-tune their business models and scale? And I think we've spoken about scale today, because as you're saying today, if we take Africa, the countries within Africa, and look at them from a granular perspective, we're not going to see the the unicorns of the examples that we have for Tesla and others. You mentioned something which I think is very important. How do we actualize the setting up of business passporting to drive regional business growth? And I think it's a coalition of the willing. We look for 2 or 3 markets, we execute, we fine-tune that, and then hopefully we bring in everybody else to say, how did this work, and how do we learn from that? How do we cement the collaboration between fintechs and indeed policy makers? We've talked about regulatory sandboxes. I've seen different executions in Africa. Some levels where some markets are very, very good, and in some markets where they haven't started. And I think there's need to harmonize and really bring imitation to innovation. So I think there's a route there. One which I think, again, I picked up from Tai was around, do we need a R&D fund for fintechs? Is there a need for that? So these are some of the issues that I think we've brought to the fore. Allow me to thank you very much for an excellent session. And again, thank the audience for the time that we've had today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you once again, Robert Ochola, the CEO of Africa Nenda, for that inspiring session. Of course, we heard so many ideas about fintech for good. And of course, he was joined by Mukaya Panic, the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Investment Officer of SCB 10X, as well as Dare Okuju, the Founder and Chief Executive Officer of MFS Africa. Some truly inspiring ideas that they threw out there in terms of how to truly enable fintech for good. And of course, we will be learning a lot more in our next session, which is about to begin very shortly. Of course, we do not want to miss a photo opportunity with the 2 guests of honor. Wonderful. I'm sure they're getting a wonderful photograph there. And what a way to remember this incredible session, FinTech for Good. Well, thank you all once again. You've been a wonderful audience. It's not over yet, because next up we have the leaders session, which is a fireside chat with none other than President Hakainde Hichilema. And it's moderated by Soraya Hakuzi Yaremia, the Deputy Governor of the National Bank of Rwanda. So please, a round of applause. Soraya.
You'll be kind to me?
Yes, with the head of state.
I'm
Thank you.
joking. I'm all yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Rwanda, and Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Zambia. It's a true honor and privilege to have you here at the Inclusive FinTech Forum, and we'll kick off this conversation to look at ways in which FinTech can accelerate financial inclusion, not only in our continent, but probably starting with a context. You are the new chairman of the Common Market of Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, and we know that in our region, although we've made strides in terms of increasing numbers of financially included people, we've seen the statistic earlier on in developing economies. In the last 10 years, financial inclusion rose from 42% to 71%. However, we know underserved communities, being the youth, women, people in rural areas, MSMEs, are not accessing financial services at affordable rate, are not accessing credit. So in your new role of chair of COMESA, what will be your key initiatives to really champion financial inclusion?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing really to do, I believe, would be to accept the fact that building on what was said by the colleagues that were on the panel just a few minutes ago, that we as a continent need to understand that in order to basically provide for our people, those of us in public office, private businesses, entrepreneurs here, we need to grow the market. We need to allow our businesses to grow to scale, a scale that obviously in the economic terms you call it economies of scale, but just the size that will allow it as a business to ameliorate the cost of delivering services, because as you grow, if you grow properly, you grow in a manner that is intentional, then you can also help basically ride over certain costs that you may not have been able to do that if you were a smaller business. Recognizing the importance of a niche player in the market. I think the point was well made here. So we as governments and then as a trading bloc, COMESA, I think need to understand that the basis upon which COMESA was created was to grow the market, to basically be able to invest, trade with each other in a significant way. And then on that basis, I think the coming in of the Africa Free Trade Area is a building block, a further building block to that. I say that because once we accept that premise, then we'll understand the importance of allowing the growth of FinTech in the sense, and other businesses, by the way, and accept that if that's a premise we agree with, why we created ourselves, then we need to support this growth of the market. How? A couple of examples or issues. Regulations. To get the regulations that support that agenda for growth, for scale. Now, it cannot be development of regulations. Let me rephrase this. Policy, laws and regulations. Policy to support this growth agenda. And it cannot be based on singular jurisdictions, countries. It must be based on cross-country, regions, the continent. Very important. So harmonization becomes important. Then, I think the overall issue around if the regulations are okay, which they are not at the moment. I think you heard the conversation. We also need to move in tandem with technological capacity. The technical skills is something, but the capacity is another. Obviously, they are somehow intertwined if you think deeply. But I'm making the isolation that technical platforms must allow for that. The skills, obviously, to create these platforms are essential. The key skills to maintain, to sustain these technological platforms is equally important when the regulations, the policy, laws, regulations are harmonized. So I think these are the two critical issues that I wanted to pull in answering your question. But also, maybe the third, very important, but sometimes not viewed as such. You can't have governments working in this direction and the entrepreneurs in the other direction. It is important that governments work and work together with the private sector. And ultimately, leadership in government is critical. A lot of things don't happen because there is no leadership, there is no resoluteness. Please understand me. The physical presence may be there, but there's no resoluteness and intentional behavior, actions that would allow for the things that we want to happen. So there's need for strong leadership, clear, succinct leadership on the political public sector side. So is the case on the business side. Then it becomes easier for the two to work together towards that agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You rightly mentioned the need to harmonize across our trading bloc, COMESA, but also across Africa. The need for business leaders, political leaders to align. But what role, Your Excellency, do you see for technology to bring more people in Africa into the form of financial services?
Well, I think it's a straightforward answer, I do believe. Obviously, it's a panel, we're having a conversation. I think earlier we were talking about the importance of technology being an enabler, isn't it? Things we couldn't do before, with technological advancement we can do now. I think we must ensure that we continue to invest R&D to make the technology even better, to make it not just capable, but quicker. Don't we talk about high-speed internet? We may have the internet, but it's not fast enough. So this is why we need to continue making those investments. Certainly, technology cannot be replaced in this discussion, in this area of what we want to achieve. And it goes without saying that harnessing talent, younger people, become even more important because they are the ones who are more tech-savvy. And I think they have the basic skills that were not there before because of certain rigidities, such as the curriculum, in the older days. But now it's different, it's much better. And I think we also want to see more of universal availability of that technology so that we want to connect the market, make it bigger. We need, as we had, the tech-savvy young people in Benin to be able to talk the same language with those in Rwanda, in Zambia, and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You mentioned about the need for technology to be accessible. But for the fintechs in our continent to also flourish, we need capital. Yesterday's sessions, Singapore shared with us their success story, where in 2015, investments in fintech were only $20 million. Today, they approach $4 billion. So what can we do as a continent to also stand out, to attract those investments that will unlock our fintechs that really solve issues we see on our continent?
I think two things, not to say too many things, but two things. One is that the public sector, the governments must actually create the environment to make it attractive for capital to flow our way. As you know, capital resources are always scarce, and I think they do flow by and large where they are wanted, where resources capital is wanted, where it's appreciated, where it's accommodated, and I dare say it, where there's consistency. Where there is consistency. You can't be flip-flopping. We have an issue in our country, by just a way of example, where in 10 years before we came into office, the mining fiscal regime changed 18 times. I'm sure the business community think I'm joking. 18 times. Taxes, this regulation, that regulation. Mining is a long-term business. You can't change the environment so often and sometimes in a dramatic way, which affects the income statements, the balance sheets, ultimately the return on capital. So this is not an exception in terms of fintech. So consistency is important. That's one side. I think once you've done that and you have basically been trusted that you mean what you've done, because sometimes things are done just as a facade to create a perception that this is a good place to do business, temporarily only. And then earlier in the day, I want to be a bit, if you allow me, mischievous to say, earlier in the day, in another meeting, we were talking about countries having to work hard to have a shared vision with the citizens of that country, such that when there's one change of a minister, of a regulator here and there, there's no fundamental shift in the way things are seen. Then you'll see that the trust levels increases. So let me put that aside. When we do that, before I do that, when we do that properly, I think capital within the competitive environment, within the various destinations that it can go to, will reasonably flow our area. Maybe not in month 6, maybe in year 1, maybe in year 2. I think it's important to understand that. On the other side, I think we as governments, as countries, together with the private sector, we must deliberately allocate capital in this area because we know the value and the importance of this area. Thank you. 2 areas.
So, Your Excellency, you touched upon really important points on trust, building trust, building trustworthy institutions, consistency. And maybe I'm taking a risk here as a regulator. We've heard the private sector panelists talking about the regulatory burdens from country to country in our continent. What would be your advice to really sort of address those challenges? How can we be more innovative as regulators and policymakers? What platforms should we create?
I think I've touched that already in a way. It is important that we are intentional to start with. We have clarity of intent. And once we are okay with that, the rest become easier because with the clarity of intent, what we want to achieve, then the path, the walking path, the working path, whatever we want to call it, becomes easier. But let me argue in a slightly different way, that once we know where we want to go, we must also acknowledge that there will be challenges, there will be difficulties. When we face those challenges, we can then deal with them properly. As the English would say, would line the ducks in a row and chop their heads one by one properly. If we are not clear, first you won't bring the ducks in one row, so it will be difficult. Secondly, you may chop one. By the time you're on the third one, you get your emotions overrunning you, and then you change course. On a more serious note, I think that is important. And on the other side, it's also fair to say that, and I want to be, my colleague who was seated there was very helpful, and the lady that was here. But let me flip the coin now. We in the public sector, I come from the private sector. My life was spent in the private sector. But now that I'm in the public sector, I would like to drive a point very clear here. The private sector must take the lead and say what it wants the public sector to do for it. You can't have a generic wish list in these situations. You have to have, yes, a generic one, but drive down to specifics. And then the key areas. Just analyze the legal framework in your country, in our countries, as a private sector operator. See how it affects your business. Drill down to that particular law, that particular regulation, and then table it for discussion with those that are able to change that law, that regulation. That's what I would like to see more from the private sector. And then we can keep up.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I hope that the young entrepreneur here and fintechs, you've given them some tips on how to lobby regulators and policymakers. I hope they make good use of it. And in your address earlier on, you touched upon the need to really build capacity for our youth, create economic growth for the younger generation. So maybe as we conclude this chat, Your Excellency, if you could share with us your vision for the financial well-being of the young people here, but also across the continent.
Okay. This allows me the opportunity to say something I said when I was over there that I will not spend time on it. The first thing is really for young people, honestly speaking, is to accept that there's time for everything. When you are young, I think the best thing to use your time on is to acquire education, to acquire skills. And in this subject on the table, you want to move in this direction. I must also say that interest is of paramount importance. Love for what you want to do. You want to be in this space, fintech, you need then to be able to have your generic skills acquired, quickly move into a specialist skill that allows you to operate in this space. And I could say more, but I don't want to, I don't wish to. Love what you want to do. Don't be pretentious. Love what you want to do. Get to do the work that needs to be done in order to achieve what you want to achieve. I think that's very, very important. And resilience. Resilience is equally important. I think once the opportunities are available to the young people must make their choices, must work on those choices, and must also be willing to network quickly. Again, technology allows us to do that. What I couldn't do in my undergraduate days, because I was at a particular university, I couldn't network with students, my peers in another university. It wasn't possible. It was very difficult. But now the young people, again, technological platform, can network with anyone in the world. Literally, with anyone in the world. And that is a great, great opportunity and advantage for young people. The rest, which they can't do, I think others like ourselves, senior colleagues in business, again, public sector, those who have seen things who have experienced things, we should be available to support our young people for them to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I believe really the aim of this inclusive FinTech forum as a dialogue for policymakers, business leaders, entrepreneurs, to really look at issues that we're facing as a continent and really bring FinTech, but guide it or direct it to increase the livelihoods, financial well-being of our population is something that's important, and you really brought home those key points. So once again, Your Excellency, we wanted to thank you very much for joining us for this Inclusive FinTech Forum and for your words of wisdom towards policymakers, business leaders, but also us regulators. Thank you very much.
Your pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Your Excellency, President Hichilema, and of course, Soraya, for that extraordinary session, so enlightening, so amazing to learn the things that we did there. Now, thank you, Your Excellencies, for gracing us with your time today. We are truly privileged to obviously hear from you and the fact that you've spent time with us. So we have come to an end. So please, let's thank you for being here. We are honored to have had you here today. And we can end this part of our very enlightening session. So please, if you, you have a busy schedule, and I believe you are about to leave. So let's thank the presidents, their excellencies, for being here. Here's a big round of applause. But can I ask you all to remain in your seats as their excellencies, the presidents, exit the room? Do remain in your seats. Yes, and if you can remain in your seats, because we do have another very exciting session ahead, certainly something you do not want to miss, in the presence of Her Excellency, the First Lady of Rwanda, Jeannette Kagame, who will be speaking to us very shortly on a very important panel, which is all about making the business case for women in FinTech. This is something we've been hearing a lot about, something that, of course, President Kagame himself has said is incredibly crucial. So please do stay in your seats, everyone, because you don't want to miss this session. It's a session with the First Lady of Rwanda. So if you can remain in your seats, you can turn around to the person next to you and have a conversation, introduce yourself, ask them about what were the key takeaways and lessons they've learned from all of these very enlightening sessions. Once again, a reminder, if you can remain in your seats, because we have a really exciting session coming up with the First Lady of Rwanda. Her Excellency Jeannette Kagame will be gracing us with her presence very shortly.
are founded solely by women. Globally, the figure is even lower at 1.5%. Fintechs founded by women share 1% of overall venture funding. Women make up only 28% of the workforce in science, technology, engineering, and math. Women leaders in the fintech industry, although growing, remain scarce. However, studies have found women play a critical role in improving a fintech's performance, including enhancing access to customers, increasing returns, improving employee retention, and enhancing innovation. Promoting diversity within organizations is not only the right thing to do, but it also makes good business sense. The case is clear for change. The case is clear that we must break down barriers. The case is clear that we must champion women. The case is clear to challenge the status quo. The case is clear for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome to the business case for women in fintech. Seize the opportunity for change and participate.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we await our next very insightful session, which is all about the business case for women in fintech, I see that a lot of you are moving around anyway. So can I please ask you all to come to the seats in front? We have a lot of space for the seats in front. If you can make your way into those red seats, that would be a great opportunity for you to have a much better view of course, the First Lady, who will be gracing us with her presence very shortly. So can I ask you all, in the back, you can come to the front seats and sit with us here in the front in these red seats. So if you're walking around anyway, a great chance to get a better seat and a better view. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, we're going to have another very exciting session coming up. So could you all take your seats, please? And once again, there are plenty of seats right in the front here. So for those of you in the back, this is your opportunity to come to the front and get a much better view. So yes, please do take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started very shortly with a truly exciting session. We are going to be graced by the First Lady of Rwanda, Her Excellency Jeannette Kagame, is going to be joining us, so you don't want to miss this. Do take your seats, ladies and gentlemen.